Hello chess learners, welcome to my chess lessons channel. I'm glad you enjoyed the AlphaZero game I uploaded. Today, I will teach you the thought process of Mikhail Tal. We will explore his tactics and strategy which he employed against Teodor Jitescu, where he sacrificed his bishop. Tal has the white pieces, and let's see the game. We have e4 by Tal, e5, knight to f3, knight c6, knight to b5, and a6, the Morphy defense. To a4, knight to f6. I don't remember if I said that this is the Ruy-Lopez, the Morphy defense variation of the Ruy-Lopez. Tal castles, bishop to e7, rook to e1, b5, bishop to b3, and here Jitescu goes for d6. I don't know if I have shown any martial attack games. I think I did one video on the martial attack. You remember, castling here is sort of like inviting white to accept the martial attack, inviting him to play c3, and after d5 we enter the martial attack. But after bishop to b3, d6 by Jitescu, c3, Jitescu castles, h3 now, h6, d4, rook to e8, knight b to d2, bishop to f8, knight f to e1, transferring the knight to the king side with knight to g3. From there he will be either able to jump to f5 or h5, bishop to d7, knight g3, knight a5 now with a tempo on the light squared bishop here, bishop to c2, and c5. And this is still all theory. Tal, he could play something like d5 to close up the position, but he goes for b3. We have g6 now, bishop to e3, knight to c6, d5 kicking the knight away, knight to e7, and to d2. Tal is preparing to capture the h6 pawn, and well, you kind of do have to defend this either by pushing g5 or king to h7. King to h7 was played by Jitescu, and what do you play here as white? Well, there certainly are a lot of options here. You could maybe try to improve the position of your rook, rook a to c1, rook to b1, depending on what you want to go for. c4 is an option, but as the games say in Soviet Russia, bishop takes pawn, Tal plays bishop captures on c5. What's the idea here? You do have to capture the bishop, there isn't really a better move. D captures on c5, and knight captures on e5. So Tal gives up a piece for two central pawns, and that by itself is compensation enough. Knight to c8 by Jitescu, and now f4. There seems to be this move, knight captures on f7. Nothing is protecting this pawn. But what would happen if Tal captures it? But if knight captures on f7 with a tempo on the queen, now queen to e7, trapping the knight, and okay, he does have knight to g5 with check, and after h captures, e5 now. And any move other than capturing the pawn with the knight would result in a massive center for white. So after knight captures on d5, and queen captures, knight to b6, and black pretty much solved all of his problems. There's no real advantage here for white. So after knight to c8, doesn't capture the f7 pawn, he plays f4. He improves his center and locks that knight on e5. Queen to e7 now, c4, adding more protection to the d5 pawn. Now Tal is preparing to push e5. B captures on c4, B captures on c4, and knight to d6. And it seems like Jitescu is inviting Tal to push e5 now and attack both of the knights, but he does have this knight to c4 with a tempo on the queen. But Tal does push e5, we have knight captures on c4, and now queen to c3. And here he takes his knight and gives up the f6 knight. But Tal isn't interested in this knight, he plays rook a to d1. What would happen after he captures on f6 and queen captures on f6? You pretty much have to go for the endgame here. Queen captures, bishop captures, and after something like rook a to c1 since the bishop was attacking your rook captures and e1. There is nothing here for Tal. Black is better in this endgame. The bishop pair in the plays on both sides of the board. A much better position for black. So after bishop to b5, rook a to d1 by Tal. Rook a to d8 and we have d6 now. Here knight captures on d6 was played, allowing these pawns to stay here freely. If you play something like queen to f8, then e captures on f6 without a. So knight captures on d6, e captures on d6, and now queen to b7. And knight to e5. Okay, Tal got back his piece, and he does have this beautifully passed d pawn, and black will have to play extremely correctly to survive this. Knight to b7, he wants to exchange a pair of knights, and here it comes the only move that really gives Tal the advantage in the position. Tal plays knight to h5. You can't capture the knight, of course, the bishop pins this pawn. And this dark square bishop on g7 is a defensive piece, so you have to play bishop to h8, not allow the knights to capture it. Queen to g3 now, and now Tal piles up on this g6 pawn, the knight is attacking it, the bishop is attacking it, and the queen is attacking it. So knight captures on e5, removing one of the attackers, but now f captures on e5. And now Tal has these two passed central pawns, and these pawns are our monsters. So queen to d7, it's not easy to find a good move for black here. Queen d7 is a good move, but knight to f4 now again piling up on the g6 pawn. Bishop captures on e5, and now bishop captures on g6 with check here. Jitesco plays king to h8. What would happen if he captures the bishop if f captures on g6? Then queen captures on g6, and after king to h8 rook captures on e5. Pretty simple. Rook captures, and now queen to f6 check, attacking this rook, attacking this. And after queen to g7, you simply capture the rook. Rook blocks, and now queen to c7, offering to exchange queens and get your pawn all the way to c7, a completely winning position for white. So after bishop to g6, king to h8 was played, and now Tal plays bishop captures on f7. He again offers the bishop, and here bishop to d4 check was played by Jitesco. Again, what happens if the bishop is captured if queen captures on f7? Then knight to g6 check, king h7, and the simple knight captures on e5, a winning position for white. So after bishop to f7, bishop to d4 check first, and again this is a very nice position. If Tal played something like king to h1 here just to get out of the way, now queen captures on f7 works for black because knight to g6 check, and there is no bishop on e5 for this knight to capture. So this would actually blunder the game for Tal. So after bishop to d4, Tal plays the only move that allows him to keep his advantage. That is rook captures on d4. Rook captures on e1 with check by Jitesco. Queen captures on e1, and the queen captures now on f7. We have queen to e5 with check. And what you play here, queen to g7 was played, and now simply queen captures on c5. Tal could have gone for something like queen captures on g7 with check, and after king captures knight to e6 forking the king and the rook, and after something like king to f5 f6 not capturing the rook but simply knight captures on c5 and being 2 pawns up. This is also winning for white, but you'll still have to work for your victory. So after queen to g7, Tal simply played queen captures on c5. Now he's up 2 pawns. He has a beautiful pass pawn on d6. Jitesco tried one more idea. He played bishop to c6 threatening checkmate on g2, and of course if you play something like queen captures on c6 you get queen captures on d4 with check. And now of course you're losing the game as white, so after bishop to c6, rook to d2 was played, now defending checkmate, and in this position Teodor Jitesco, the Romanian honorary grandmaster, resigned the game. I mean, he could have gone for something, but it's actually winning by force for Tal. This bishop is attacked on c6, and after bishop to d7, knight to h5, and the queen has no more squares on this dark square diagonal. Only move is queen to a1 check. After queen to a1 check, king to h2. You have to play something like rook to e8, and now rook to f2, queen to e5 check. You simply exchange, and after knight to f6, you're winning the bishop on d7. If the bishop moves, simply d7, and the knight is preventing the rook from stopping the pawn. The rook can't stop the pawn from d5 or from e8, as the pawn is also protecting e8, so you'd have to capture at knight captures, and you're up a piece and a pawn. Completely winning. This is just one of the variations that shows how powerful the position is. And friends, if you have learned something new from my chess content, then let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel. Bye bye.